Hey guys, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Carla, the head of English at Ignite. I have been overseeing all of your work this year and I'm super excited that you're so close to finishing. I mean, not super excited because we'll miss you, but super excited because you'll have it done. So what I wanted to cover today were a couple of last minute things just to kind of make sure you're all on track with everything. I'm just going to cover some quick points about exam technique, what to do in your reading time, like breaking down the question, and one of the big ones I'm going to cover is how to do an extract question and to make sure that you practice doing a question where they give you an extract. So where they give you like maybe a section of the text, beginning, end, whatever it is, and you've got to incorporate that because a lot of people don't know how to do that. So let's just start with your like where you should be at right now. So you should be at a spot now where you are not looking at your work when you're doing your practice questions. Okay, notes away. If you don't know your stuff, oh my gosh, get to it. But look, it's, you know, you got to just break it down, learn what you need if that's the case right now. But I really hope no one's in that situation. You should just be writing things out in the 40 minutes. It might be taking you a little bit more than 40 minutes, but you got to get there really fast to be able to you know, be doing it in those time increments. Don't be afraid of cutting things out. If for some reason you get a difficult question or you think you can't get through the whole thing and answer the question really well, cut material. You always prioritize answering the question over having more content. You'll get a much higher mark for having a shorter essay that answers a question really well than a longer essay that doesn't. Okay, very, very important. So you should be writing your stuff without looking under exam conditions. And look, peeking is a really big thing that happens right now that can trip you up in the exam, because that's what you kind of translates into a mind blank. So if you're in a spot where right now you're practicing your stuff and you forget something, put an asterisk, keep going, okay? You've got to push on under exam conditions in your practice, the same ways you'd have to do it in an exam. Come back at the end and then review something you've forgotten. If you just go, oh look, I'll just have a really quick peek, it'll be fine, I'll remember it later. Do not do that at this point. You will not remember it later, or you wouldn't have at the very least trained yourself to practice moving on if you know you can't think of something on the spot. Okay, so that's a really key skill to have, to be able to keep that momentum going, to push on even if you forget something. Okay, come back, review it later, and you'll remember it a lot better on the day. Okay, there should be no surprises on the day. You should know how much you can write. You should know that you can write it all because you've just done it that many times before you've actually gotten in there. So that's the first thing. Next thing is, oh no, time yourself, that was the next thing. Then, in terms of your time management, one of the things to do, and this kind of comes into what to do in your reading time. So obviously you've got 10 minutes reading time for paper 1, 5 minutes reading time for paper 2. In your reading time, make sure you break down the times that you need to finish each of those sections and start doing this in your practice. So let's say you've scheduled that you're going to do a practice exam tomorrow morning, 9 till 11. You've got 10 minutes reading time, so you'll go till 11:10. Oh no, sorry. My apologies. You have an hour and a half for paper 1 with 10 minutes reading time. So anyway, you give yourself that time. In your reading time, make sure you plan what time you're going to have the first section finished. Okay, even more important for paper 2, because you've got 3 sections, you've got 40 minutes per section. Because what happens is that, and you'll probably, this will totally make sense when I say it. Let's say you've got 2 hours and you get half an hour in. You'll be like, oh, I've still got an hour and a half. That's plenty of time. I'll just keep cruising. But really, in reality, you've only got 10 minutes left for that section, right? So, you know, when you're at the end of, you get to the end of the paper and you're kind of like rushing to get everything out, you want to bring that intensity a little bit earlier so that you don't then run out of time. Okay, so rather than looking at it as being a 2-hour exam, let's say for paper 2, you look at it as 3 40-minute sections. So if I know I'm starting at like 9 o'clock, I've got 5 minutes reading time, so I've got from 9:05 to 11:05. By 9:45, module A or whatever section you do first needs to be done. Then by, you know, calculate it, 10:25 or whatever it is, you need to have the next section done, and then so on and so forth. Okay, that will really help you maintain and work towards having your sections completed in those 40 minutes, because it's so important to stay in that 40 minutes. If you go 5 minutes over, which obviously isn't a lot, but by the time you then cut down 10 minutes for section 3, or your whatever section you do the last, that 30 minutes is not a lot, okay? There's so much to do on all fronts, right? So you've got to have the full time for each of those sections. So that's a good way of being able to kind of set that up in reading time and then work towards those deadlines as you go, rather than trying to like rush everything at the end. Cool. Then in your reading time, especially for paper 1, I think a lot of people kind of just, I'm just going to kind of cruise and start reading the, the comprehension papers and, like is in the short story, the poem, whatever it is, right? I don't personally think that's the best use of your time, because you're not in a spot where you can actually analyze anything when you are actually doing that part of the section, like when you're doing that reading, okay? Because you're just reading it, you can't write anything, you can't underline, and people kind of do that a bit more laid back, like, I'll just read it, but you rarely even get through reading all of it anyway, because there's so much reading to do. So what I would actually recommend, and obviously this applies for the next paper as well, is read the essay question first, then and start thinking, like, what are the key words in this question, really, like, and you should know, you got to underline each individual keyword and think of synonyms for each one, so one synonym maybe each, and then go, okay, great, how do those words now link to my arguments, my paragraphs? Don't just go, I'm going to change my topic sentences. You've got to go, what I want to argue for paragraph 1, how does that relate to the words of the question? Great, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, and then you get your head around how you're going to answer that question. That will take a good couple of minutes of thinking on its own, and it will save you time later, and I think will be more efficient. I've always experienced it to be more efficient in that 10-minute reading time, rather than just kind of like cruisily reading your section 1 text. So after you look at the essay, really have a think about it, break it down, then go to the questions of the first section, because obviously that will target your reading. Then you can start reading. I probably focus on the shorter text, because again, you're kind of actively reading. If you're looking at an image, you can be like, oh, okay, great, yep, I can see the techniques, okay, cool. Some people do this thing where they start like trying to underline with their nail and stuff. I don't know if that works, but in any case, don't just passively read. Okay, you want to be like really actively going, okay, I'm looking for the answer to this question, I've already looked at the question, I'm looking for the techniques, okay, cool, there's some, etc. So very important to make use of your reading time. Similarly for section 2, don't just read the questions and then look out the window. Like, read the questions, really sink into them. Like, you can think about, what are the key words, what are they asking, how am I linking that to each of my paragraphs, and then obviously once you can pick up your pen, jot a couple of notes down from what you figured out in the reading time, so that you don't kind of lose that momentum or that train of thought. Perfect. So then after that, make sure, obviously, like when you are using the words of the question, key places, always start with the question in the introduction. That's got to be the first place you start. Never parrot the question. Don't just repeat what the question says, obviously, and start your essay. That's like what a lot of people do. I like kind of taking the first half of the essay question and then like making it into my own sentence in the second half, and then kind of taking the second part of the question maybe for the second sentence. That seems to generally work quite well. And think of it like you were integrating quotes, you know what I mean? So just you're making their words into like your sentences. But so important to obviously use their words, because it's the only way that you can, and this is all this comes down to, you need to prove that you can engage with their question and show an understanding of the text through their words. That's the only way to show that you've done the work that you have, and you have done so much work, and it's kind of sad in a way that it all comes down to kind of very much a memory test, and you having to prove that you've done it by using their words and doing it under exam conditions and blah blah blah. Anyway, that's another conversation, but that's what we have, so that's what you got to do. Right? So it's very much about you proving that using their words, and that's why that's so important to make sure you've got it all throughout the introduction. Every topic sentence should have a link to the question. Your concluding sentences of your paragraphs, like litter them throughout your paragraphs, and make sure they're meaningful. You know, like sometimes people just throw words in, like even something like textual conversations, but then you look at it and you're like, oh, actually, like that wouldn't even be a sentence I would write normally. You know, that doesn't really make sense. So again, like you know, if you want to submit anything to get it marked, if your tutor's not available to do it, I'm more than happy to do it. Please try and get it sent to me by Sunday, so that I can have a look, but I'm more than happy to mark anything. But one of the things that you want to do after each section that you do, you can actually mark your own work. So what you want to do is, after you do a section, get a highlighter, go and highlight all of the places that you've used the words of the question. right? And you will then be able to see for yourself, like, oh, geez, okay, I got a lot of highlighting in the first half, but oh, whoopsie, like forgot about it for the second half. And then you go, okay, great, next time I know where I'm going to do that. So if you can see that for yourself, that's like on the spot marking. You don't necessarily need someone to even look at it for you to be able to see that, okay, you haven't answered the question properly. And then, you know, you could take that on board for the next time. Ideally, even give yourself a mark. I think that's a really good exercise. But yeah, if you can highlight it, it also makes it a lot easier to mark, because then we can just go straight to where those words of the question have been used and make sure they're in context, because I know you know your stuff. So it's not at all about content knowledge or any of that at this point. It's about making sure you have engaged with the question, use the words with your material in a sophisticated way. So last thing is an extract question. So with an extract, make sure you practice doing one of these questions. So it's like if you get, you know, like a chunk of your novel or like an extract from your play or whatever, a part of a poem, that kind of thing. So here's what you need to do. The first thing you need to do is, I mean, it's kind of like when you're analyzing comprehension, go through and underline like what are the key points, where are the techniques, what ideas are going on. They'll all match up with the stuff that you have, because obviously it's not going to be different to anything you've already written about. It's just now about using their quotes in your essay, exactly the same way as you're using their words, their essay question words in your answer. So when you're doing your introduction, refer to the stimulus extract in the way that you're going to actually be talking about it. So let's say, you know, in the particular quote, you've got something about, I don't know, corrupt power or something. Trying to be generic because I know everybody's got lots of different texts. So what you would say is you say something like, you know, as evident in the stimulus extract given, the corruption within these power structures has been represented in such and such way, let's say. Okay, so I want to actually see you use the words in the extract given. So they know exactly how you're going to be using the extract, but you don't need to quote from it just yet. You can leave that for when you actually use the quotes, but at least right from the introduction, they know that you're engaging with their question, their extract, okay, rather than you just like randomly quoting it and then just expecting them to know that that quote you used was from the extract that was given. Look, chances are they may, because they'll be very familiar with the quote given that everyone's done an HSC question on it, but you still want to make it like smack damn so obvious right from the get-go, like this is how you're using it. And I think it's appropriate to introduce it properly anyway in the introduction, because it is the question. It's a key component of what they're asking for. Then use their quotes as much as you possibly can. So ideally what you can do is just remove quotes you've used and put in quotes that they've given to prove the same stuff, because again, whatever you've been arguing will link into whatever they've given you from the extract. Try to have a reference to it in each paragraph. That would be like best case scenario, but you may be in a spot where they've given you like an extract right from the end. I don't know, let's say, okay, I'm going to give an example. Let's say 1984, George Orwell, or, you know, Crucible, whatever. They give you that part, like just like a section from the end. It may not be appropriate to go into like really in-depth analysis right at the beginning of your essay, if it's about the ending, right? So that's why you mentioned in the introduction. So you've kind of contextualized where you're going to be addressing that particular stimulus extract and what it's about, and that you understand it, whatever. Then when you come to maybe the end of your last paragraph, that's where you'll do a much more in-depth analysis using their quotes and substituting, you know, your quotes out and putting their quotes in, proving the same particular argument or whatever you were going to be talking about. But yeah, ideally, if you can put it throughout, great. If it's got to be at the beginning or the end or whatever it is, just make sure it's in the introduction. You've got analysis and quotes. And then again, when you refer to it in your essay, you may be in a spot where you're like, you've already used some of those quotes. That's actually happens a lot, right? But don't just go, oh, great, I've already got this. I don't need to actually talk about the extract. I still want to see the words, the exact words as evident in the extract given. Here's the quote. Okay, even though you had it prepared or whatever, make sure you actually say that, so they don't need to be like, because sometimes I've marked things and I didn't actually read, because it flowed so beautifully, which is obviously the perfect scenario. I didn't even realize it was from the extract, you know, but you want that to be so obvious, right? So that's why you want to put those words in, like, as evident in the extract. Here's the quote, right? You could mention the conclusion, but I think by the time you're done in the intro and you've got your quotes in the essay, you've probably done enough there. Then the conclusion, obviously, you just bring it back to whatever the other keywords were of the question. So practice doing that stimulus question. You may need a little bit more time for it. So think about, now one of the things I did is I knew that if I got a particular style of question for my HSC, so let's say an extract question, that I wasn't going to have time to write everything that I wanted or everything that I had prepared. So what I did was I prepared beforehand what I would take out if I needed more time on answering the question or substituting something or whatever. Okay, so that's why you want to practice as many questions as you can before, so that you know that, oh, yep, I've gotten that particular question. Okay, cool, I know what I'm going to take out, rather than having to try to think on the spot about what you're not going to include. You've already got that prepared, and then you know it's gone. Okay, done, right? So you may need to do it on the spot, because again, if they give you an extract and whatever you need to substitute, obviously you've got to kind of do that based on what's going on in your essay. But you should know beforehand if you're struggling to write your answer and answer the question in 40 minutes. And so prepare beforehand. Okay, cool, these parts I can probably take out if I have to. Oh my gosh, this is so important, and I'm so glad I remembered to say it. Always make sure you write a conclusion. It may seem like a stupid thing to do because you're not really saying anything new in a conclusion. You're like, oh, but I could write 1 or 2 more points to my last paragraph and that's more information. You will get an automatic deduction of 2 marks for not having a conclusion. Okay, so please make sure you always write a conclusion, even if you've cut your last paragraph short, even if you've cut your whole last paragraph out, I don't care, put a conclusion. At least 1 sentence summing up. So important, because they are marking you on making sure you understand the essay form. Okay, introduction, paragraphs, conclusion. Always make it look like you've ended, that you've had the perfect amount of time, you've managed your time brilliantly. So even if you've forgotten things, they don't need to know about that. Okay, just make sure you've finished the last paragraph, put your full stop, put a conclusion. I did put a couple of dot points for the last paragraph of my last section for my HSC, because I wanted to put a couple more points in, but I didn't really have time to word the whole thing through. That's okay, again, as long as you do write a proper sentence, at least conclusion, where you kind of sum up your argument, link it back to the question. Okay, I think that's all I can think about right for now. But yeah, good luck. Email me, call me if for any reason you can't get through to your tutor, or that they can't mark things over the weekend. I'm completely available. And yeah, it's been awesome having you guys. Good luck for next week, and I know you're gonna kill it.